So apparently Davante Adams can only play with quarterbacks that Davante Adams has already played with, as he has been shipped to the New York Jets in exchange for a conditional second-round pick. The conditions on that pick, if Davante Adams is on the Jets starting roster for the AFC Championship game or for the Super Bowl, it becomes a second-round pick, or if he is, I believe, first or second team All-Pro, which, I mean, right now, none of those seem super likely, but the championship one seems much more likely than Adams making it to an all-pro team. So obviously a lot of different ways to go about this one. We'll start with what it means for the Jets, who are coming off of an extremely disappointing loss against the Buffalo Bills on Monday Night Football. And they are obviously in win now mode. When you go out and acquire Aaron Rodgers, it is championship or bust time, right? Like that's what it is. That is the world that you enter when you have a 40-year-old quarterback and you have made the moves that you have made. And this team has not been good enough offensively. And it really does seem like things are starting to get into a bit of a groove with Rodgers and Garrett Wilson. It still seems a little bit labored with getting him the football, and he still needs to be the guy. And now you have a very good number 2 in Davante Adams, albeit one who is certainly on the decline and one who is certainly starting to fade as the years kind of go on. I still think he is a really good receiver, and I do think that Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback for him, because with Adams, one of the things that has got him in trouble, whether it was, well, not in trouble, but one of the ways that the Raiders were unable to use him I guess effectively, is Jimmy Garoppolo is not a risk-taking quarterback. And it certainly doesn't seem like Aiden O'Connell is at this point either. You kind of need to be open for them to think that you're open. Davante Adams is not a great separator at this point in his career. What he is someone who is huge, and someone who is very good at catching footballs, and someone who is very good at winning those one-on-one battles. And so when you have quarterbacks who are a little bit reluctant to throw balls into coverage, and you have a guy who always looks like he is in coverage, it is just not a good mesh. But Aaron Rodgers has worked with Davante Adams enough to know that even when if Davante's in one-on-one, he's never really covered. Like, he's kind of always open. And he is someone who is so good at the contested catch that they will be able to go out and make a play. And knocking microphones all over the place. Sorry. He will be able to go out and make a play and be able to step up for this team and kind of take care of those catches. And so I think that there is I think there's a real chance that this actually works out okay. And they are going to, it's tough because I think this will improve them. But I don't think that this is going to be okay, well, now everything is fixed. Because there's still problems. They got run all over by a backup running back last night. And there are still problems with missing kicks and all of those sorts of things. And also, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what kind of, I guess... It doesn't matter what kind of players you bring in. If the offensive play calling isn't good enough, the offensive play calling isn't good enough. So this is not going to completely take care of the biggest issue that this team has, but it does make them a better football team than they were before. It gives them now a better option than Alan Lazard as a number 2 and another playmaker for an offense that desperately needed another playmaker in their offense. So I do think that this does make the Jets a little bit better of a football team. On the Raiders side of things, this was not handled very well. And I think once they made the decision to let Derek Carr go, I think that you need to also make the decision to let Davante Adams go. You brought him in there specifically because he wanted to play with Derek Carr. And so when you send his guy out, you're going to have probably a not overly enthused wide receiver on your hands. And then it was clear that they didn't have they went with Jimmy Garoppolo, so I think you were trying to convince yourselves that you were going to be a winning football team, but when that didn't happen, Adams should have been the first one out of there. Instead, they turn what could have been maybe a guy you got a first-round pick for a guy that it is maybe a second if everything goes your way. So the overall handling of the Adams situation was another in a very long line of very poor handled situations for the Vegas Raiders franchise. And now it just, I don't know where they go from here, because this is not a very talented roster, and it is a coach that on a pretty consistent basis feels like he is in over his head now. And so you are basically starting over, and that is why you are getting a lot of the rumors of the Detroit Lions looking at a Max Crosby in terms of going out and making a trade. Like, that there isn't a whole lot of value on this Raider roster right now, and it kind of feels like you need to start over out there in Las Vegas. In terms of the actual trade for 2024 here on August 15th, I think they got about as good of value as you could have from the Jets. There was rumors that the Chiefs would have gone up to a second to get Davante Adams. If that is the case, then this is a bit of a miss, and we have talked about it before. I don't think anyone would be going after the trade of Adams to the Kansas City Chiefs. And it's like, oh, well, now the Chiefs are better than the Raiders. That this is what really puts it over the top. Like, no, that's not it. The whole, oh, you can't trade them in division is so dumb, I think, in 2024. So if that actually ends up being the case, then whatever. But you still have at least a path to a second-round pick. It frees up a ton of cap space. Now, the Raiders had a ton of cap space last year, spent it on a defensive tackle who's now hurt. But again, they are in a spot now where they can go out and try to make a move. But if you are looking at what the core foundation is of the Vegas Raiders right now, it's kind of Max Crosby and nothing. Like, there are guys who are good, you know, like Spillane is, I think, a really good linebacker, and feels like someone who is just kind of, they've cloned, he's one of those guys that feels like he's been cloned, because he is just it feels like he's in 4 different spots at once. But again, like, after that, like, there isn't a ton, and they have a couple gadgety type guys on offense, but like, all 3 running backs kind of suck. Neither of the quarterbacks have shown that they can be any good at all. Like, this is just, it's a bad football team. From a fantasy football standpoint now, as we kind of transition into the fantasy discussion, I do think that Davante Adams still has significant fantasy value. A lot of the value that he had coming into the year was that he was going to be the number 1 guy on this offense, and now he's not. But he is going to, I think, while we are not big fans of the Jets offense in general, I do think that it is going to be I do think it is going to be a step up for this team from what the Raiders were. And also, we have seen a lot of teams focus a lot of their coverage over on Garrett Wilson. And so 2 things can happen here, obviously. One, that's going to continue to happen and Davante Adams can feast. Or Adams goes there and you at least have to pay a little bit more attention to him than you would Alan freaking Lazard. And so you can't just load up on one guy. And that kind of helps both of them out. I would assume it is going to be more that one, that it's not just going to be everything focused over on Wilson and then Davante Adams does his thing. For Alan Lazard, like, I don't think there's any fantasy value left at all, quite frankly. But I do think that for Garrett Wilson owners, this is a positive. And for Davante Adams owners, he's going to be playing now, because I do think that hamstring will all of a sudden have healed up, which is nothing short of miraculous, really. And so I think that is a really good opportunity now for this for Davante Adams fantasy owners to actually have this guy who has a connection with the quarterback go out there and maybe ball out a little bit. So I do think that it is kind of positive for those guys. And for the Raiders dudes, you've been doing it for a bit now. Like, Brock Bowers is an every week play. Jacoby Myers, when healthy, kind of works into that area as well. We did see the downside of some of the other options in Vegas so far. And even like an Aaron Rodgers kind of bumps up a little bit more in terms of his fantasy value. But overall, it's a good trade, and it makes the Jets a better football team, but it does not address the real needs. And yeah, like Toxic said, Davante Adams went from a 2-4 team to another 2-4 team. And like, you see people on social media, it's like he wanted to go to a place where it was like a guaranteed contender with a long, like, proud history, and you went to the Jets. So it feels like a bit of a because there are so many better options, it felt like, just for the overall enjoyment of football. Like, the Jets needed a number 2 receiver. He comes in as a number 2 receiver. But, like, him on the Ravens would have been amazing. Him on the Chiefs would have been unbelievable, right? Him on the Bills, same thing. Even, like, I was going to say, it wouldn't be the same, but it would be an upgrade on what the Cowboys are trotting out there on a weekly basis as their number 2 wide receiver. Like, they need skill position players. And so this was one where it just kind of felt like he is an upgrade over what they have, but it's not necessarily how they would use him. So it's a weird one, but I do think it is kind of a good thing there for the New York Jets overall. I mean, they brought in a talented player today. It's something that they needed to do.